said to us, 10,000 eyeballs on LinkedIn or 10,000 people to potentially hire me.
The ability to communicate is always in demand.
Siema, siema!
Employers or colleagues
Skończyłem właśnie robotę.
insight to offer can open unexpected doors.
Słuchajcie, o 19.
And before you know it, you are regularly not just sharing content, you're contributing to conversations, you're learning. There's so much learning that can
13 godzin dzisiaj. 13 godzin, mój rekord.
an audience, a community, and who knows, maybe before you know it, you have a business. This is an $104 billion economy. There's over 50 million creators, and I think we're just scratching the surface there.
Every day, millions of people turn to LinkedIn to learn and talk about the things that matter in their lives, driving meaningful conversations that lead to opportunity. Join the conversation on LinkedIn.
Ale wieje tutaj strasznie, wiecie? Wieje taki wiater. Aż zajedziemy nad jezioro zobaczyć, czy tam jeziora nie wywiało. No nad jeziorem to chyba jak nad morzem musi być sztorm. Tak tu wieje, że kurde ledwo do auta doszedłem. No żart. Ale mocno wieje, mocno.
But the truth is, we often harm and disrespect the ones we love. So One Love gives students a language to recognize and discuss the signs of unhealthy relationships. But we all know these signs don't just apply to romantic situations. They can show up in our relationships with our friends, our cousins, our uncles, our neighbors, and oh yes, our coworkers.
Kurde, ledwo żyję, powiem wam. Muszę okulary, kurde, znowu założyć. Tak jestem przemęczony. Szyby zamykaj. Gdzie jesteś? W samochodzie jestem. W tunelu. Ale co to znaczy, gdzie jestem? Jadę na hotel, Dzisiaj teraz jadę jeść i spać. Pokażę ci, gdzie jestem, jak nie. Radosław Żurawski. Pozdrawiamy Radosława Żurawskiego z Facebooka. Pozdrawiamy Grzegorza Leśniowskiego z Facebooka. Szyby zamknięte są. Teraz wam nie pokażę, jak wieje, bo akurat tunel. Ale wieje, kurde.
Listen to TED Talks daily to make your daily routine a little brighter. Find it now wherever you get your podcasts. TED Business is supported by the So What podcast from Boston Consulting. If you're tired of boring business experts who can't get to the point, this is the podcast for you. Think of it like chatting with a keynote speaker after their speech.
Ale audica, kurde, daje radę. Jedziemy pod wiatr i kurde, ciągnie.
Technology to travel and business to the human brain. Follow the So What from BCG wherever you find your podcast.
No całkiem możliwe, że to jest Nord Stream 2.
Worked with our sponsor LinkedIn to share amazing stories from their community. Stay tuned for insight on how finding your voice can lead to opportunity from Andre, who's helping millions of people share their story.
So you mentioned earlier that now you teach, we both teach, and you're an expert in teaching about healthy relationships.
Zajedziemy sobie nad jezioro.
So as you think about that, are there any work relationships that you look back on and you're like, that was kind of problematic?
Oh my gosh. So I got into this healthy relationship space because a friend of mine, her cousin was killed. Yara Love was her name. She was killed at the University of Virginia. And I started learning about domestic violence and realizing this is a public health epidemic in this country and there's no large-scale prevention efforts. And it was really clear after she was killed that lots of people saw lots of different things. And if a domestic violence expert had been brought
Co tam?
they would have
Kurde, dzisiaj był długi dzień w pracy, wiecie?
but none of the young people had that education.
Jeszcze dłużej robiliśmy niż normalnie.
If they'd had that information.
No ale jutro będzie krótko, jutro szybko
But
skończymy.
as we started doing the work,
Jutro tylko do...
that nobody was talking
Jutro tak do 13 chyba będziemy pracować.
Stats show this is a 0 degree of separation.
Także ten.
We do not hold relationships that were in.
Także szybko się z wami połączę.
We think it happens to other people elsewhere. And so we really started using the relationship health language and unhealthy.
Ale nad jeziorem będzie widać chyba fajnie. Jak zajedziemy nad jezioro, to powinno być fajniej widać.
Why is that? I always say like 100% of us have been in unhealthy relationships and 100% of us actually do unhealthy things. And it's no surprise. None of us are taught ever. So that was the first epiphany. The second epiphany was that relationships are relationships. So while we had started with romantic
Tak,
relationships,
to jest... W tym tygodniu zrobię najwięcej godzin w swoim życiu, jeśli chodzi o pracę tu w Szwajcarii. Od poniedziałku do czwartku, raczej od poniedziałku do środy było po 12 godzin i dzisiaj 13. To już w 4 dni narąbałem 42, 44, 46, 49 godzin już zrobiłem w 4 dni. I jeszcze jutro to tak 6 godzin wpadnie. No to będzie 55 godzin. Ale ledwo żyję już. To jest, powiem wam, że kurde masakra tyle godzin robić. Fakt, że wypłata będzie spoko, ale jednak to jest męczące, kurde, tyle godzin tyrać. Kurde, gość chyba na długich jechał i mnie raził, dziad.
It's really volatile and it's really intense. So I want to do my best here. I want constructive criticism, but that was, would I be able to have that conversation? Yes. Would I also recognize the times in my career where I perhaps was not as healthy and realized that I was maybe reacting emotionally instead of pausing and thinking about, wait a minute, let's not be intense here. Let's like, you know, these are common things, but yes, I absolutely would have managed my career differently.
Tell me what your process would have been for that. I mean, we've all lived that, right? You kind of actually talked about him in the third person, him or her, excuse me. Men and women yell.
A ile to kasy na polskie? Nie wiem. Dużo, kurde. Wczoraj liczyliśmy, to wyjdzie koło...
This was a man, by the way, and it wasn't a man I knew well. It was a man in another department, and a late night request for something had come in, and eager to be a high performer.
To wyjdzie tak 1700, 1800 franków.
No
nie wiem, 2000 zł brutto w tydzień. Nie, co ja mówię? 10 tysięcy. 10 tysięcy złotych w jeden tydzień, brutto. To jest, ja wiem, czy to jest dużo, kurde. Tak 8. No nie wiem dokładnie. Byś musiał przeliczyć. 55 godzin razy 35 franków moją stawkę za godzinę. Oczywiście to jest brutto, nie na rękę. No to nie wiem, ile to wyjdzie. 9 tysięcy złotych czy 10 tysięcy za tydzień, za pracę od poniedziałku do piątku, ale dużo godzin.
Wait, pause. She just mentioned 10 healthy signs, but a lot of us don't know what they are. And I want to highlight 3 of them that I think are particularly
To nie jest tak dużo chyba, nie wiem.
First, taking responsibility. This means
Trzeba więcej, trzeba myśleć, jak tu więcej zarobić.
and admitting when you've made a mistake. Second, healthy conflict. openly and respectfully discussing issues and confronting disagreements non-judgmentally. And third, respect. Valuing each other's beliefs and opinions. So Katie says an important
Pozdrawiam Krzysztofa. Krzysztof z YouTube'a napisał, że pozdrawia Krzysztofa. Ja też.
But I still had a question for Katie. My question is, most organizations would say they have something like that. And for context, I work with lots of organizations.
Ale to jest Grzegorzu brutto, to nie jest na rękę tyle. Tyle na rękę nie dostanę, tylko brutto. Jeszcze trzeba podatki zapłacić, ubezpieczenie, mieszkanie.
Well, I would say that bullying is the same problem as domestic violence, in the sense that nobody thinks they're a bully.
Ale no największa tygodniówka, jaką zarobiłem w życiu. Jeszcze tak dużo nigdy nie zarobiłem w tydzień.
Not always, but bullying also labels versus really putting fine-tuned emphasis on the behaviors you want to see. Bully is more of a label and it's a broad scale description. But if you say you want to have an environment where people trust each other, and this is what it looks like, and this is defining what you don't want to see, it's defining what you do want to see. Because it's no environment's fault, but none of us have ever been taught these things. So hopefully, we'll succeed at some point educating every kid, giving every kid a baseline, giving them this language, and they'll walk into work environments already having the knowledge and having it normed for them that this is something they should do and they should talk about. But until then, I think companies have to step up and just think a little creatively about what they have to do to create the climate they really want to create.
Yeah. Let's talk about the concept of intensity, which is something that you mentioned, intensity versus suffocation. And I want to go back to this idea of, somebody...
Zobaczymy, czy nad jeziorem wieje.
That the intensity has gone to suffocation at work. What advice would you give them? And as you said, we were both in lots
Już dojeżdżamy do jeziora.
experiences in consulting and in our work lives before, and even sometimes now. What advice do you give?
Well, a couple things. So, I think there's two different levels here. One is the work environment intense. And I think that different people have different tolerance for that. When I think about all the job jumping around that I did early on in my career, I went from an extremely intense environment to an extremely not intense environment. And I realized that wasn't me and that wasn't me.
Siema, Anetka.
So I always tell people,
Anetka się znowu uaktywniła. Bo jakieś 2 miesiące Anetka obrażona, nic nie pisała do mnie, nie oglądała lajtów, a teraz się Anetka uaktywnia. Na zimę. Jadę na chatę, Anetka. Ale najpierw nad jeziorem zobaczymy, co tu się dzieje. Czy są fale? Zobaczę, czy są fale nad jeziorem.
Every day for 6 days, and it really sort of destroys morale on the team. Usually we tend to just say, oh, that person's so annoying or something like that. That's not helpful.
Kurde, tylko nie ma miejsca. Nie ma miejsca, żeby zaparkować.
Everybody can change their behaviors, but the only way somebody will is if you flag it for them. And we have to increase our comfort level with this. This can be uncomfortable. This is why we need a whole social change about tolerance for these conversations.
Nie ma fal. Myślałem, że są fale.
Without checking in to make sure that the team can keep up, it really has a negative effect on the team. And
To słabo jeszcze wieje. Myślałem, że mocniej będzie.
Awesome. But because we have to do this as a team, do you think we could check in at the beginning and that you could think a little bit about how that sprint might affect us? So you can think about ways to have that conversation, and that in itself opens an avenue. You give that kind of comment, the person might say,
Co to, Krzysztof, dziś na kolację rumianek, szałwia i jabłka? To dobry miks, kurde, na kolację zrobiłeś,
At the
Krzysztofie.
end of the day, it's figuring out how to have those things that are not condemning a person as annoying or whatever it is.
To gdzie ty byłaś, Anetka, tyle czasu? Bo Anetka tu mi napisała na czacie, że no coś ty nie byłam obrażona, coś ty na ciebie. No to coś ty, Anetka, robiła 2 miesiące. Się wszyscy widzowie martwili, co się z tobą dzieje.
Okay.
All right. So, you're my manager.
Ludzie już pisali, kurde, że,
I have come bold and confident.
że Anetka nie
Just
wróci,
belittled me, and I'm like, it's time for me to talk to my manager.
że już znalazła sobie jakiegoś
Get myself ready emotionally right now. So here we go.
chopka,
Hi, Katie.
a tu Anetka
How are
jest.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. You know, I've really been enjoying working
Z Anetkami
with
to nigdy nic nie
you.
wiadomo.
The project that we're on, I feel like we're making so much progress. But there was an experience that happened the other day that I wanted to talk to you about.
Okay, tell me more.
When you asked me for that deliverable and I gave it to you.
Yep.
Tutaj nie wieje. To tylko wcześniej wijało. Może już przestało wiać. Nawet po ludziach nie widzę, żeby wiało.
Yes.
I kind of felt like somebody's an idiot, and I'm really
O kurde, ale to jest torpeda.
I'm trying my hardest.
Jak naciskam gaz do dechy, to
I just want to share that with you because it
wciska w siedzenie.
I'm so sorry that I made you feel like an idiot. That was definitely not my intent, but if that is the impact I had, then I'm super grateful that you just raised it with me. I was frustrated because that spreadsheet was super important for another person's work. And when I realized, I guess I was sort of mad at myself for not catching the mistake, but I probably was intense in my response to you. And I get
A nie, trochę wieje, po flagach
in
widać.
front of the whole project team.
Flagi są aktywne.
That was a mistake. So, and here you say that you're trying to do your best, and I think you're doing, by and large, a great job here. So, what I want to do is I do want to apologize and have you hear that. If you would like, I think this is a good example I can bring up with the team about like a time where I did something that had an unintended consequence, but a consequence nonetheless, and that we want to
Na
create
co, Anetka,
where
czekasz?
we don't sort of lash out or we don't make somebody feel unvalued.
Ty już, kurde, miałaś być w Szwajcarii, już rok czasu jedziesz, Anetka, do Szwajcarii, kurde,
So I'm wondering,
nie możesz dojechać.
how can we continue to have these types of productive conversations too?
Well, it might be interesting to use this experience and for us to come together to talk about how you experienced it and then what I could have done better. Maybe we can use that as an opportunity with the team. Why don't we have a clear the air moment where we talk about some of the things that may be unspoken, and then maybe we can on a go forward basis really commit to like on a monthly basis checking in with each other, because I genuinely think we have
Anetka to jest miglans,
who care
kurde, i
about each
tyle.
other, but work relationships are challenging, communication styles are different, so I think we just need to create more communication about this.
I love that. Thank you so much for, just taking the time to listen and to set a path forward. And please let me know how I can be helpful in any way.
Yes, I think you can encourage other people that this is a work environment where we want everybody to feel comfortable and feel able to have healthy relationships with their colleagues, but it's not something that happens overnight. I appreciate you being
Anetka na mnie czeka. Sami widzicie.
And end scene. Scene ends here. Okay, but you're a great manager, obviously. Like you had the tools.
Well,
You had the tools. You had the tools to be able to have a good
O kurde.
conversation, and not all do.
well,
Zobaczymy, czy sklep jeszcze
100% I have
otwarty.
tools, which is why I can do that role play. And I think I'm a good manager. I'm not
Idę
a
sobie jeszcze coś
perfect manager.
kupić.
And I think one of the
Ale
things
nie
that
zabieram
I
was, bo w sklepie nie ma zasięgu. Już kiedyś próbowałem. Kiedyś już was próbowałem zabrać i zaraz rozłączyło.
I didn't feel like my comment was belittling. So the first thing I would say is I would highly recommend that before going in to talk to your boss, you
Także narka, później się może jak będę kolację robił.
Yep.
one of our business school classmates, she told me very early in our careers,
Fale-
whenever she had to have a hard conversation at work, she imagined the person she thought would handle it best.
Dobra, narka, pakinosy i pakinoski.
And she would imagine how her dad would approach this conversation. And in her head, she would almost like map it out. So I use that visualization process